the previous video we have seen how to create a form using formic, but if I now click inside these components, it will give some errors because we haven't configured the necessary commands to gather data from these components. So therefore we can use yup. So yup is basically a React library to do front-end authentication in a more robust way. So you can check their docs as well. So it will showcase all the necessary details that you want. So if you are not familiar with yup, you can check that documentation as well. So what basically do is it creates a schema to do front-end validation, right? Then we don't need to declare these sort of functionalities again and again. So what we can do is we can simply call their functions and do our authentication workflow. So for example, let's say in this schema they are checking whether this name is a string and whether they have entered a string or not, so something like that. So for the email, whether it is a string and whether it is an email, right? So in back in the days, if we need to check whether input string is email or not, what we have done was we need to create a separate regular expression to check that necessary string contains the relevant email characters. But by using yup, they do the necessary regular expression checks. What we need to do is basically simply calling their function, right? So it is somewhat ease of development for us as well. Then if all the login or all the necessary authentication workflow has been passed, then it will gather the necessary information and pass it back to the backend database or backend framework or whatever you want. So that is the idea about using this yup. So let's declare those stuffs as well. Okay, so first we have to go inside our login page and yeah, we need to create a login validation schema, and we need to create a separate function to take data as well. So first I will create a use state component to gather this login data, right? So we need use state react hook. So I think this is the first time we are going to use a react hook, right? So basically use state is sort of like a variables in React, right? So in Java you have string or sort of like variable types. So in the React framework, use state is sort of a function that initialize necessary variables for us, right? So these variables can be anything. It can be a string, it can be an integer, or it can be a JSON object, or whatever you want. So I will make this use state as a login form, and the handler is set login form, right? So this is the way how we declare a use state. So basically login form is the variable and set login form is the handler function that handles the changes of this variable, right? So that is the way how we declare use state hooks inside React. Then yeah, then we need to have default login data as well. So default login data is basically email is empty and password as empty as well. So default login data has been passed over here like this. Then inside this login form, we need to get email and password out of it. Then we can easily do the necessary uh, validation by using here. Right. Then I need a function to get data out of this input component. So therefore I will make it as const handle on change. So it's basically arrow function with triggers for each event, and it will take the necessary name and value from that target component, and it will set the login form details. Before setting the login form details, we need to spread out the previous login form details, and we need to reinitialize uh, with it using the new value, right? That is the way how we use these set functionalities inside React. Because otherwise, if I simply specify like this, what will happen is basically it will sometimes it won't update the corresponding value correctly. Therefore, I need to specify React. Okay, first populate the old values, then do the modifications, right? So the necessary updates will be override with the previous old values, right? Then this handle on change is sort of a function we need to call inside our input component for each change. Therefore, within the on change uh, function, on change handler, on change event, it will call handle on change, right? So that is the way how we use it. So this on change is sort of a props that it needs to be declared inside this input. So it has been passed as a props, and it will be populated as a props as well, right? So on change will be automatically populated over here. Then yeah, I think we almost done, but we need to declare our yup validation schema as well. Okay, so let's see how to define yup validation schema. So I will make a comment. Let's say yup validation schema. So I will name this as login validation, and it is a yup object. So before using yup, we need to import all the objects uh, of yup, right? So from yup. Then all the necessary objects inside the yup will be included as yup. Okay, so that is the meaning of this command. So then I can simply use yup. So yup dot object, and it is sort of a JSON object, right? So this JSON object contains two things basically. First thing is email and password. So email has necessary validation schemas. So first thing, it must check whether this is a string or not, right? Then it will check we have entered something or not. So let's say if we have entered something, then it will be okay. But if we haven't entered something, it must give a error response, right? So let's say error message is email address is required, right? Then we need to check whether this is an email or not. Okay, so we can use email, and if it is not an email, we can display a message like email must be a valid one, right? and we can define any other constraints like that. But for now I think this will be okay. Then for the password, similarly it must check whether the password is a string and whether we have entered the password or not. So password is required, and since this is a JSON object, all the necessary JSON properties must be distinguished or must be separated by a semicolon, right? Okay, I think we have almost done, but now we have to pass these JAP object relations and other necessary handlers to the formic. Otherwise formic doesn't know what sort of validations we are going to perform and what sort of initialized values that it have, right? So inside this formic component, we have to enable reinitialization. Therefore we can do modifications to these inputs, and it must have initial values as well. So initial values are basically email and the password. The email default value will be passed here and password default value will be passed to here. Then we have a validation schema as well. So validation schema is login validation. So we have defined this validation schema by using YAP. YAP will generate the necessary schema that is required to perform the validation inside form. Then yeah, I think that's all we require. And obviously when we are going to submit this form, we need to use another handler as well, like let's say on submit handler. But for now I will just comment it out by saying to do define on submit handler, because in for our case we don't need this handler because I'm not going to develop a specific backend associated with this front-end component. But if we have a backend, obviously we need this handler, otherwise we can't pass the necessary data to the backend. Okay, so I think you're almost done, and now we can check the pages. Now you can see there is no errors, but it has this default value, so I will remove this stuff. So now you can see it gives the necessary errors as well. So if there is no details, like if I remove these details and if I click outside, it will give me this error because I have to enter the email. And if I enter some sort of a text and if I click outside, it will say email must be a valid one because this is not an email, right? So this is a constraint that we have specified inside the YAP object. So it will basically check whether the string is a valid email or not, right? So it is very easy to develop sort of validation schemas by using YAP. Then let's say this is sort of a valid email, then there won't be any errors, right? Which means validation has been passed. So if I click this password component, it doesn't show me any errors, but if I click outside, it will say you have to enter password. It's because password is required. So if I enter password and click outside, then there will be no errors, right? So it is how the front end validation happened using formic and yeah. Then yeah, let's say if we have an error, so now we have displayed this error message, but let's say we need to make this input component red as well. Then let's see how to do that as well. So what we can do is basically we can go for our input component, and so this is the place where I do the changes for the border, right? So let's say if there is an error, this border must be maybe let's say red, right? So what we can do is basically we can make this as uh, like this. Then we can basically pass the variable inside this class definitions, right? So let's say uh, okay, so let's say if we have meta.touched or meta.error, right? Then we need border, let's say border red 600. But if we don't have any errors, we need this default gray color, right? So you can see how that happens, right? So if you don't have any errors, right, it doesn't show me any stuff. But if it has errors, it will showcase me this red color, right? But if it doesn't have any errors, it doesn't become red. But if it has errors, it becomes red, right? So similarly, if password has errors, it will become red. If it doesn't have any errors, it will be as like this. So that's how we can do the changes by using to do the changes for the styles by using Formic as well. And yeah, I think now our components and the validation has been done. In the next video, I will complete this form and I will show you how to do navigations for the authenticated pages as well. Okay, so thank you.